Love stops hurting not when the right person arrives, but when you stop disappearing inside yourself. And I want you to feel this truth slowly, not as an idea, but as a quiet recognition in your body. Because the deepest pain in relationships is rarely caused by what others do. It is born in the subtle moments when you abandon your own needs to keep connection alive. You learn this early. You learn to soften your truth so love would stay. To silence your intuition so harmony would survive. To adapt, explain, endure, not because you were weak, but because you were afraid that being fully yourself would cost you closeness. And this is where the pattern begins. As Carl Jung said, the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent. Many women carry another burden as well, the unlived self they leave behind in relationships. Each time you override your inner voice, a quiet fracture forms. Not dramatic, not visible, but cumulative. You call it love. Your body calls it exhaustion. Chronic self-abandonment doesn't announce itself loudly. It whispers. It shows up when you say it's fine, while something inside tightens. When you stay longer than your dignity wants. When you give more clarity, more patience, more understanding, hoping it will finally be enough to be chosen fully. But Jung understood something crucial. The psyche keeps score. What you deny does not disappear. It turns into pain, resentment, and repetition. And so relationships begin to mirror the same wound again and again. Different faces, same ache. Notice this gently. You don't suffer because you love deeply. You suffer because you leave yourself quietly in order to be loved. And the most painful realization is this. The hurt you feel in love is often the echo of moments when you did not protect your own truth. When you asked someone else to value what you yourself were setting aside. This is not self-blame. This is awakening. Because the moment you stop abandoning yourself, love begins to change its shape. It becomes calmer, cleaner, more honest, and the pain that once felt inevitable begins to loosen its grip. This is where our journey begins, not with fixing others, but with returning to yourself. Self-abandonment does not look like rejection. It looks like loyalty at the cost of yourself. And that is why it survives for so long without being questioned. You stay when something inside you asks to leave. You explain what should be felt. You wait, adjust, hope, believing that endurance is proof of love. But love was never meant to require your disappearance. In Jung's view, the psyche seeks wholeness above comfort. And when you fragment yourself to maintain a bond, the unconscious responds with anxiety, heaviness, and emotional pain. Not as punishment, but as information. Pain becomes the language of the self that has been ignored for too long. Think about how often you sensed the truth before you accepted it. That tightening in your chest. That quiet knowing you pushed away. Jung said the unconscious always knows first. And every time you silenced it, you taught yourself that connection mattered more than inner truth. This is how painful relationship patterns are formed. You become drawn to people who confirm what you already believe deep down. That love must be earned, maintained through effort, preserved through sacrifice. Not because you want to suffer, but because the psyche repeats what it has not healed. And so the same dynamic appears again and again. You give more. They give less. You try harder. They pull away. Until exhaustion replaces desire. But here is the shift that changes everything. When you stop leaving yourself, the pattern loses its power. Not immediately, not dramatically, but unmistakably. You begin to pause instead of pursue. You listen instead of override. You notice instead of justify. And something subtle happens. Your body relaxes. Your voice steadies. Your choices become quieter but firmer. This is not emotional coldness. This is integration. Jung called this individuation. The return to the self that no longer needs to fracture in order to belong. And when you begin to live from this place, love stops feeling like a battlefield. It starts to feel like alignment. You don't chase closeness anymore. You allow it to meet you where you stand. And for the first time, pain is no longer the price of connection. It becomes the signal that guides you back to yourself. At first, returning to yourself feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable, because you are no longer performing the version of you that learned how to survive love by shrinking. You hesitate before answering. You check in with your body before agreeing. You notice when something feels off, and you don't rush to correct it. This is where many women panic. Because self-abandonment once felt like safety, and self-loyalty can feel like loss. But Jung warned that what feels familiar is not always what is healthy. The psyche clings to patterns not because they are good, but because they are known. And when you stop leaving yourself, you step out of the known and into truth. Here is what begins to change. You stop over-explaining, not because you don't care, but because you finally care about yourself enough to stop proving your worth. You stop chasing emotional clarity from people who benefit from keeping you uncertain. You stop bending your needs into something smaller so they won't feel too much. And this is when relationships start revealing their real nature. Those built on your self-erasure begin to feel unstable. Not because you changed, but because you stopped compensating. When you no longer abandon yourself, others are forced to meet you or step away. And this is not loss. This is filtration. Jung believed that every relationship activates an inner figure, an image of love shaped by early experiences. When you stop betraying yourself, you also stop feeding that inner image of love as sacrifice. Slowly, patiently, the psyche learns something new. Connection does not require disappearance. You begin to feel safer in your own presence, less reactive, less anxious, not because you finally found the right person, but because you stopped outsourcing your stability. And here is the quiet miracle. Love hurts less when you are no longer at war with yourself. When your inner world becomes a place of refuge instead of negotiation. This is not about becoming guarded. It's about becoming whole. And from wholeness, love no longer demands pain as proof of devotion. There comes a quiet moment, not dramatic, not loud, when you realize that the pain was never love itself. It was the constant inner negotiation, the silent bargaining where you asked yourself to endure just a little more so the bond would not break. And when you stop doing that, something shifts. You begin to notice how often you used to override your own limits, how quickly you dismissed your discomfort, how easily you carried emotional weight that was never meant to be yours. As Carl Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And the darkness here is not cruelty or failure. It is the habit of abandoning yourself so love could continue uninterrupted. When you stop leaving yourself, you no longer rush to repair what you didn't break. You no longer absorb moods that don't belong to you. You no longer mistake intensity for intimacy. This is where love begins to soften. Your nervous system starts to trust you again. Your body no longer braces for impact in conversations. Your silence becomes grounded, not fearful. And this is crucial. Relationships that once felt intoxicating may now feel draining. Not because they changed, but because you did. You are no longer anesthetizing yourself to stay connected. Jung understood that growth often feels like disorientation before it feels like peace. The old pattern collapses, and for a while, there is emptiness. But this emptiness is fertile. It is where a new definition of love begins to take shape. A love that does not ask you to betray your inner truth. A love that does not require endurance to survive. A love that meets you where you are, not where you shrink to fit. And for the first time, you understand something profound. Love stops hurting when you stop making yourself the collateral damage. What begins next is subtle, but irreversible. You start recognizing yourself as someone you must not abandon, even for love. You feel it when you pause before replying instead of rushing to reassure. When you let disappointment exist without turning it into self-criticism. When you notice the urge to explain yourself and choose silence instead. This is where pain loses its authority. Because pain thrived when you believed that love required self-sacrifice. when you assumed that being chosen meant being flexible with your own boundaries. But now, something deeper anchors you. In Jung's view, healing occurs when consciousness expands enough to hold contradiction. You no longer need to choose between connection and self-respect. You see clearly that any bond requiring your self-erasure is not intimacy. It is attachment rooted in fear. And fear cannot build love. It can only maintain dependency. You begin to understand how often you confused emotional hunger with chemistry. How intensity felt like destiny because it activated old wounds asking to be soothed. Jung would call this projection, mistaking unresolved inner material for romantic meaning. When you stop abandoning yourself, projections dissolve. You no longer chase closeness that destabilizes you. You no longer romanticize inconsistency. You no longer wait in emotional suspense, hoping clarity will arrive if you give enough. Instead, you observe, you feel, you choose. And this choice is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It simply removes you from dynamics that once relied on your self-neglect. Love begins to feel quieter, less addictive, more real. And even if loneliness appears, it feels cleaner than the pain of staying where you were never fully met. Because now, your presence belongs to you first. This is not the end of longing. It is the end of self-betrayal. And from this place, love no longer hurts. Because you are no longer the one inflicting the wound. There is a moment when you realize that your standards were never too high. You were simply meeting people at a level you no longer live in. This realization can feel lonely at first. Because when you stop abandoning yourself, fewer people can reach you. Not because you became distant, but because you became aligned. You stop tolerating emotional ambiguity disguised as depth. You stop translating inconsistency into potential. You stop waiting for someone to become who they repeatedly show you they are not. And this is where many old connections quietly dissolve. Jung wrote that when consciousness evolves, old attachments fall away naturally, not as punishment, but as consequence. The psyche will not allow you to unsee what you have already integrated. Once you return to yourself, you cannot convincingly pretend otherwise. You notice how your body reacts now. The tightness appears sooner. The relief comes faster when you choose yourself. Your intuition is no longer something you consult after the damage. It becomes your first language. Love begins to feel different because you are different. You no longer merge to feel safe. You no longer lose your center to preserve closeness. You allow people to reveal themselves without interference. And this is the quiet power of self-return. You don't need to confront, demand, or explain. Your presence alone sets the tone. Jung believed that the more individuated a person becomes, the less they need to convince others of who they are. And from this place, love stops feeling like effort. It becomes a response, not a pursuit. You may notice something surprising. Some people step forward with clarity when you stop chasing. Others fade when you stop carrying the dynamic alone. Both outcomes are truthful. And truth, even when it ends something, hurts far less than the slow erosion of self you once called love. Because now, no matter who stays or leaves, you remain. Now love asks a different question of you. Not how much can you endure, but how present can you remain with yourself? And this is where the deepest change unfolds. You stop scanning for signs of abandonment. You stop bracing for withdrawal. You stop anticipating disappointment before it happens. Not because love suddenly became perfect, but because you are no longer positioned beneath it. Jung understood that anxiety in relationships is often the fear of losing the self, not the fear of losing the other. And when you stop leaving yourself, anxiety loses its fuel. There is no inner exile to protect against anymore. You feel disappointment now without collapsing. You feel distance without self-erasure. You feel desire without losing dignity. This is emotional maturity, quiet, grounded, unprovable, but unmistakable. You begin to notice how little effort it takes to stay where reciprocity exists. How love no longer needs to be negotiated, managed, or rescued. It flows. not because it is effortless, but because it is mutual. And when something begins to hurt again, you no longer ask, "What can I do to fix this?" You ask, "What is this asking me to see?" This single shift changes everything. Pain becomes information, not punishment. Discomfort becomes guidance, not a test. Distance becomes clarity, not rejection. Jung said that suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning. And the meaning here is simple and radical. Love cannot heal you if you abandon yourself to receive it. You are no longer trying to be chosen. You are choosing alignment. And from this place, love either meets you or reveals that it cannot. Both outcomes protect you, because now, even when love ends, it does not take you with it. What emerges now is a different kind of strength, one that does not harden you, but steadies you. You no longer confuse attachment with intimacy. You no longer chase reassurance when uncertainty appears, because the most important relationship is no longer at risk. You are no longer trying to secure love by being indispensable. You are no longer afraid that honesty will make you unlovable. You are no longer negotiating your worth in moments of emotional scarcity. Jung believed that wholeness is not achieved by adding more, but by reclaiming what was split off. And the part you are reclaiming now is the self that stayed silent, adapted too quickly, loved too carefully, afraid that truth would cost connection. But something has changed. You speak more slowly. You choose more deliberately. You leave earlier when something feels wrong, without drama, without justification. This is not avoidance. This is self-respect embodied. And here is the paradox. Love becomes safer when you are willing to walk away from what hurts. Because safety does not come from attachment. It comes from knowing you will not betray yourself to maintain it. You begin to feel attraction differently, not toward intensity, but toward steadiness, not toward urgency, but toward presence. Your nervous system recognizes what your heart once overlooked. Jung said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And now, you no longer allow reactions that corrode you. You allow only those that expand you. Love stops hurting because you stop staying in places that require pain as proof of devotion. You stop romanticizing suffering. You stop calling endurance love. And in this new space, something remarkable happens. Even silence feels peaceful. Even solitude feels kind. Even waiting feels whole. Because you are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are already home. There is a quiet confidence that settles in when you no longer abandon yourself. A confidence that does not need to announce itself, because it is rooted, not reactive. You stop asking love to save you. You stop hoping someone else will finally see what you had to ignore to stay. You stop waiting for permission to take up space in your own life. And this is where love truly transforms. Jung spoke of the self as the center of the psyche, the place where opposites are reconciled. When you return to yourself, love is no longer a place of escape, but a place of meeting. Two whole people, not two wounds leaning on each other for balance. You notice how differently you listen now. You hear what is said and what is avoided. You sense effort without demanding it. You recognize absence without personalizing it. This awareness does not make you suspicious. It makes you free. You no longer fear losing someone who cannot meet you. You no longer cling to potential at the expense of reality. You no longer bargain with pain for moments of closeness. And perhaps the most radical change of all, you trust yourself to leave when love begins to ask for your disappearance again. Not angrily, not dramatically, but clearly. This trust becomes your anchor. Even if love wavers, you do not. Even if someone pulls away, you remain intact. Even if connection ends, you are not undone. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And when you stop leaving yourself, love stops hurting because it is no longer asked to compensate for your absence. You are here now, fully present, and love, finally, has somewhere real to meet you. And now, as we arrive here together, I want you to feel what is different inside you, not as excitement, but as calm recognition. Because love no longer hurts when it no longer requires your absence. You have learned something essential. Pain was never the proof of depth. It was the signal that you were leaving yourself behind. As Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And what once felt like fate, repeating patterns, familiar heartbreaks, the same emotional ending in different forms, begins to dissolve the moment you choose presence over persistence. You no longer ask love to validate your worth. You no longer sacrifice your inner peace to keep someone close. You no longer confuse longing with connection. Instead, you stay with yourself, in discomfort, in clarity, in truth. And this changes everything. Love becomes a space you enter whole, not a place you disappear into. Relationships become reflections, not rescues. And pain, when it appears, becomes brief, because it is no longer fed by self-betrayal. This is not the end of love. This is the end of loving against yourself. From here on, you recognize the difference between attachment and devotion, between chemistry and safety, between intensity and depth. You choose slowly. You feel fully. You walk away without guilt when your soul asks you to. And that is the quiet power you were always meant to reclaim. Love stops hurting when you stop leaving yourself. And once you return, you never truly abandon yourself again. This is not a lesson. It is a homecoming.